The United States in the late 1960s was simultaneously euphoric and very, very scary. A lot of things were opening up. There was a lot of drugs. There was a lot of sex. There was an entire generation that was testing just about everything you could test. The counterculture. There was a lot of political involvement. The election of 1968, Chicago, that was real big and real ugly. And there was a lot. 1968 was a horrible year. That was the year of the Tet Offensive, and I believe it was January. And that entire year, I'm sure there's probably been a book already written about 1968, but there will be more because it was one of those key years. And from then to the end of the decade, I think it just steadily got worse because in the United States the authorities were clamping down, and the peak of that was Kent State. And I drove across the United States the weekend of Kent State, and that was every state was calling out their National Guard to suppress what they knew were going to be riots that coming weekend, right? And everywhere you were going, there were, this university was going out on strike, and this university was having a mass demonstration, and this place was going to have, and you could just drive, and we did. We drove all the way across the United States that week, and it was just like this country could come apart.
My name is James Johnson, and I was born and raised in Vancouver, British Columbia. I'm a resident of Vancouver, and I understand that the reason for this interview is because of my service in the U.S. military and that I am a Canadian Vietnam veteran. As a child or as a young teenager, I was in the Navy Cadets, Navy League Cadets, then the Sea Cadets, and then when I graduated from high school, went to the Air Force Reserve, and that was a way of raising money for paying bills to go to university. The Cold War mentality that had been so prevalent from the times of Dwight Eisenhower up through into the early 60s and into 1963, when basically culminating with the assassination of John Kennedy, that whole philosophy started to change gradually from that period on. There was, of course, the involvement in Vietnam that began to drag on. There was the increase in casualties coming back from Vietnam. I would say until 68, and I know for sure until the summer of 67, there was widespread support for the Vietnam War in the United States. There was a massive parade in New York City in 1967 that was attended by all the trade unions of New York City, and they estimate that there was some 100,000 people that marched in support of the Vietnam War and the troops.
Can I ask you though, like you're mentioning these American things,
yeah.
But you were a Canadian.
I'm a Canadian.
You're a Canadian.
Yes.
So why were you interested in that so much?
Well, this was, okay, when you're looking at the time of John Kennedy, you're looking at that idealism, and that was, to me, a North American phenomenon, not just restricted to the United States. That idealism of ask not what you can do for or what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. That idea of service, that idealism, that to me was not just restricted to the United States. That was a North American phenomena, and and I believed in that.
So when did you decide that you were going to go down to the United States and join up?
I enlisted in 1966, September of 1966, through Bellingham, Washington.
Was there anything specifically that made you finally decide I'm going to
No, it was just the whole culmination and I deciding that this is what I wanted to do.
Okay, my name is Stephen E. Miller. I'm an actor. I live and work in Vancouver, BC. I've been here since 1968, which was when I came here from Durham, North Carolina by way of Virginia Military Institute. At that time, there was tremendous pressure on everyone to go to university in the States. We were the baby boom. It was a real high-tech kind of aerospace, and we're going to go to the moon and all that kind of stuff. And you really did have to go to university. That was the message that you got as a young person. And I didn't really have to do that because I was going to go and work in my family's business. That was the program. I was just going to go and follow in my dad's footsteps and work at the shop, and that was going to be it. And that's all I really wanted to do. And time came to go to university, and I was not a particularly good student. I was sort of a C student, and I didn't really care what I studied. I was interested in the war and history and stuff, so I went as a history major. And I got accepted to Virginia Military Institute. And my mom was from that part of Virginia and had kind of romantic attachments to men in uniform. I realize now that my mother, God bless her, she's 88, I realize that her whole life she's been she likes a man in uniform, and I didn't realize that until just a few years ago. but that's partly, she pushed me to go there, and I said, well, yeah, okay. I thought it would be better. I would be an officer. And I was under the illusion, too, at the time, that every man in the States had to, at one time, go into the Army. I just thought that's what you had to do. And there were all these little cartoons that would come on Saturday morning, little public service announcements that would say, join up, go into the Army now, so that when you won't get drafted just after you've started your job or just when you've had your first child. Do it now, get it out of the way, join up, you can get education and blah, blah, blah. And so it sort of made sense to me in a kind of wacky way, because I was under false impression, that I should go into the Army and be an officer and get that done, and then I could go on with the rest of my life. So I think I probably became aware of Vietnam in around 65, and by 1966, by the middle of 1966, I was completely opposed to it. I think what had happened is the more history I studied at school, the more I became aware of the roots of the conflict, and the more that I began to actually start pulling for the Vietnamese, or the Vietnamese who were fighting that war, the guerrillas, the Viet Cong, the Viet Minh, the people who had basically been fighting for a war of liberation since before the Second World War.
What did you decide to do?
Well, it was very difficult to do anything. I was really scrambling. By 1968, I had no idea what I was going to do. I was planning to quit school, which would prevent me from becoming an officer, right? Then I was going to run away to Canada. And but I went home and tried this plan out on my family, and they just all collapsed in tears, and they were completely shell-shocked by the whole idea. But basically, my big position finally was that I didn't want to kill anybody. If they would send me anywhere else or employ me to do anything else, at least I wouldn't be killing anyone. I would